We're finna go inside and check it out.
D-A-N-M-O-O-R-E, Senior. I'm a native of Philadelphia, came to Atlanta in 1978, and I met Dr. Benjamin Mays in 1978, who was the president of Morehouse College. And when I heard all the accolades given to him, the first question I had was, why isn't there a Black History Museum here in Atlanta? You know, I'm a filmmaker. And when I came here to establish my second film company. But when I asked myself that question rhetorically, I had to go ahead and just do one. If there wasn't one here, how we started the Apex Museum back in 1970. Well, I've always had an interest in African culture and African experience. Even growing up, I've had an interest in that. And how will young people who come along behind us, African history has interested me. And of course, when I was coming up, the only thing you heard about Africa was a Tarzan movie. So a white man in loincloth, swinging through a jungle, chasing 10,000 natives across the continent. And I wanted to see for myself what Africa was all about. I bought a camera and went to Liberia, West Africa, and I did my first full-length film on my own. Filmed it, edited it, wrote the script and everything else on Liberia. I had my son with me when I went over there. And on the way over, he asked me what was I going to call the film, what the name of the film be. I said to him, sometimes a film will come to you, or the name will come to you after you start filming. We got to Liberia, I met at the airport, and was taken directly to the Minister of Information's office in Liberia. And we walked in the door, he asked for our name, and then he said to me, is this your first trip to Africa? I said, yes, it is. He said, welcome home. And that became the title of the film, Welcome Home. When I look at where we are now, we would have been much further down the road had I realized I was still in the South. And that makes a difference. Because the support that others have gotten while they were here, we were not getting. And I kept asking myself the question, why? Then it dawned on me, you're in the South. You're still on a big plantation. And no more would the Germans build a Holocaust museum. We can't expect white America to build a museum that highlights or talks about African civilizations, Africa before slavery, or even during slavery. So most museums in this country deal with the civil rights movement. First exhibit here that we show now is called Africa, the Untold Story. And it's based on the information from a professor from Georgia State University named Dr. Asa Hilliard. And one thing he said consistently to a young lady who used to work here was never let them begin our history with slavery. And so we take you back thousands of years before slavery to let you understand and see exactly what Africa and African civilization has contributed not only to American history but to world history. We wouldn't have art, we wouldn't have architecture, we wouldn't have culture, we wouldn't have medicine, we wouldn't have arithmetic had we not transported those things from our native country. If a young person starts off learning their history as being enslaved, as being called ignorant or stupid or lazy or not being able to read, that's what carries you through life. So if your first impression of yourself and of your ancestors is that of being in servitude, then you believe that you belong in servitude. So that's why it's extremely important for young people to understand and realize that we contributed to world history before the world even knew how to write. We were writing. Sweet Auburn Avenue had a very, very rich history. In fact, in 1957, Fortune magazine called Sweet Auburn Avenue the richest Negro street in the world. So on Auburn Avenue, you had the drugstore, you had the accountant, you had the doctor, you had the dentist, you had the tailor shop, you had the politicians, all on Auburn Avenue. The first black bank started here on Auburn Avenue, Citizens Trust Bank. So they were compelled to live and move on Auburn Avenue. Alonzo Herndon, a former slave, built the Atlanta Life Insurance Company, which became the second largest black-owned insurance company in the nation, second only to North Carolina Mutual. Today you can hardly find Atlanta Life Insurance Company. In fact, Georgia State recently bought the building for $10 million. So when young people walk by here today and look at buildings that are built now, that were built by blacks, they have no idea or no reference point that blacks built these institutions. So my question rhetorically becomes, how is it that slaves can build empires that free slaves can't maintain? A few black businesses that have survived, one's an insurance company which has survived and maintained its presence. The barbershop is gone, many other old institutions are gone, but you do have still remaining a few buildings left. But like everything else, you can look at and say that Auburn Avenue is being colonized. You know, I could almost sit here and say the British are coming, the British are coming, you know, like it was in Paul Revere's day. But they have a propensity for taking control of things and just simply landing on soil, taking it for their own and moving on. But the onus falls back on us, because we have had and do have enough people in this city who are African Americans who, if they knew and loved their history, could have refurbished Auburn Avenue and could have made it the street that it was at one time. Integration also had a role in that, because as soon as integration came about, many of the black businesses moved from Auburn Avenue and ended up on Peachtree Street and other areas of the city. So that also helped dissipate the power and influence that was once here on Auburn Avenue. To not have a museum that just has artifacts from the past, but a museum that presents to young people especially a complete virtual walk through history. So we're going to transport you back to ancient Egypt and ancient Africa and let you walk through and see pyramids being built. Let you walk through the old African villages and see what kind of spirit was in those villages, what kind of life, what kind of culture was in these villages, and then bring you forward through the hold of a slave ship, through the plantation, and through the slave era, and through auction periods, so you can understand what we have a nation have been through and to emerge undaunted. An extremely strong father. Edwin Moore didn't take any stuff.
Wow.
I'm the youngest of 9 children. And when we grew up in Philadelphia, on Beauvoir Street in Philadelphia, he was the head of the house. And he drilled in us black pride. We didn't know we were poor. We were poor, we didn't know it. We walked to school on rainy days with cardboard in our shoes to keep the water from leaking in through the bottom and getting our socks wet. But we were proud, even though we didn't have any money or very little money. We were still taught to be proud. And I had the privilege when I came to Atlanta of visiting the archives, which was the only archive in the nation that has the original draft cards of those in World War I. And I saw his draft card. When I turned it over where it said race, he said African. That's the kind of person he was. So he was very, very strong and positive, and that he brought on to us. I know who I am, I know who I serve, I know what I can do, and I know what I have to do. I don't have a choice. This museum will be successful. We will unquestionably teach and help young people how to be proud of their past and their history, and how the responsibility is now on them and on you, basically, to make a change.
Right.
We have to understand media. He who controls the media controls the mind. So when you're growing up, if the only image you have of black life is what you see on some television shows, what you hear on the radio, if the gangster rap and those people who are talking about violence and not having pride in their history, if that's your point of reference, that's who you will inspire to be. So we have got to change the image. We've got to change the dynamic. we've got to change the message of what our young people see. When you think about it, we as a community are arming ourselves against our own children. We are afraid of our own children. We're afraid of our grandchildren, because all we see every night on national news and on local news is violence committed mostly by young black men. So if this is the image you have growing up, if this is the role model you have growing up, we can't expect you to see or be anything else. So we have got to take control of this image. I know there are people right now today sitting in rooms planning our destiny. There are people right now sitting who are creating films and television shows for small children to shape our minds. We have got to understand that and grab a hold of our history to know who we are. They're taking the word slavery out of the history books. So it'll be called the plantation owner and the workers. Now they were workers, but they weren't slave workers. We have not even gotten to the point of having our history books speak accurately of who we are. When I was in school 1,000 years ago, there were two blacks in history, George Washington Carver and Booker T. Washington, and that was it. It may skip now from that to Rosa Parks and Dr. Martin Luther King. And they're the only people, or the few people that we know about. We talk about 1 month of the year, which is entitled Black History Month. We have got to know as a people who we are and the strength that we have. Folks talk about young people doing things wrong. They say most people, they don't have a job, they don't have any money. No one was any poorer than slaves and sharecroppers. We didn't go about killing each other or killing someone else. We worked, we performed, we learned, we were even prohibited from reading, but we learned how to read anyhow. So there is no excuse for us not learning to do what we need to do to take advantage of what we have around us and take control of our lives. And I speak to young black men in particular, because the black man is the leader of the family. I don't care what anybody says, I don't care how popular or unpopular it is. Black men are the leaders of the family by divine order. And we must take control again of our families. For young people especially, to learn and to understand that our history did not begin with us in chains and shackles. Arithmetic, medicine, archaeology, astronomy, architects, all of these things came from Africa. Reading, written language, they all originated on this continent. The richest continent in the world. I'm going to say it again. The richest continent in the world. And yet when we see images of Africa, it's almost always a small child, swollen belly, and the proverbial fly on the lip. That's all we ever see about Africa. In some cases, white missionaries talking to Africans and teaching them certain things. This is, and still is, the richest continent in the world. Then you look at African civilization, you look at something as small as England, not even as large as Rhode Island, I don't believe. Yet they became the second largest colonizer, not of a country, but of the entire continent. France became the largest colonizer of Africa. England, as small as it was, their slogan was, "The sun never sets on a British Empire." So wherever you go in the world, you're going to find that British are there because we believe in, we came, we saw, we conquered, and that's their philosophy. And so looking at Auburn Avenue, it's the same thing. It has not changed. It's them wanting to be in control, them wanting to be privileged, entitled, and so their mindset says that. We have got to change our mindset and understand who we are, what we have given to the world, and the right we have to be here and to own what belongs to us and what's rightfully ours.